or 4.5 inches of rain in the past 4 to 8 hours. So basically the last 2 days or so. Did get one report of it looked like a substandard rain gauge, just so you know, up here west of Boone of over 6 inches, but that was kind of an anomaly. Most of the highest totals we've seen have been around 4 to 5 inches of rain in the mountains. Now here in the Piedmont, we're still tracking some isolated showers moving through, so it is a damp evening out there, and this would generally be the trend that I would expect for the remainder of the evening. But we did see some severe weather in the eastern part of the state that we're keeping an eye on as well. Those are staying away from us. But what we have to watch this evening is not only this area in the mountains and foothills where we do have some flood advisories in effect, it's going to be these areas to the south where the clouds have broken up a little bit and we're actually starting to see some sunshine. I want to show you the satellite and radar here in a minute, and I'm going to widen this out and we'll show you the satellite and radar because it'll show the clearing trend. You also see the lightning strikes here. This is what we call the dry slot. This is a pocket of dry air at the mid and upper levels of the atmosphere, so it really shuts off the heavy rain, which has been pushed off to the north and east. That heavy rain band is right there, so that is pushing there. This break in the cloud cover, while it has reduced our rain amounts, it's starting to kick up some showers and thunderstorms, and those are the ones we're going to have to watch as we go into the evening. I'm going to turn on the warnings here just to show you we do have a couple severe thunderstorm warnings within this line. One in eastern Tennessee, that one is going up in that direction. But you see these cells down here, these are likely going to continue moving north. Now they will weaken because our sun sets tonight at 8:18 exactly. So once we get past sunset, we should see most of these storms kind of weaken a little bit, but there's still going to be what we call elevated thunderstorms, likely producing some extremely heavy rain as they push up to the north and then head into our area. So overnight tonight into tomorrow, we're still going to see scattered showers and storms. You see temperatures tomorrow will be in the mid to upper 70s with that 50% chance of rain. But if we go into tonight, I'll show you how the overnight hours kind of look, because I do anticipate we're going to see some overnight rain. Notice the rain chances do ramp back up after about 8 or 9 o'clock, and then into the wee hours of the morning, we're likely going to see another round of scattered thunderstorms. I'd say between midnight and maybe 3 a.m. or so, and then just good old-fashioned showers through the morning hours. But look at the low temperatures, probably only falling back into the mid 60s in some locations. So the key to all this flood risk is obviously going to be the flood watch, which I'll quickly show you just to show you the areas of greatest concern. Remember what a watch means. It means conditions are favorable for flooding in and around the watch area. It's this area in the mountains and foothills where we're seeing the heavy rain. Not much of anything here in the Piedmont. That's why we're not seeing heavy rain. And then this area to the east, which saw some heavy rain actually late this weekend into Monday morning, which has kind of set the stage for why they're under the gun for possibly some flash flooding as well. But the areas we're going to watch are the areas that have the highest totals so far, and some of those totals in the mountains have been up there. Brittany Van Voorhees has been with me all afternoon tracking these storms as well. And Brittany, the areas with the heavy rain, those are the greatest concern areas, because even with scattered showers or storms, they move over those already flooded areas or already saturated areas, could cause additional flooding.
Yeah, nothing, we will say nothing like what we had during Hurricane Helene. There was a little bit of social media hype behind that earlier today, Brad and I were talking about, but it is something similar to, or at least reminiscent to, what we can sometimes see during a tropical system, where we have some of those outer bands from the low pressure system, and we have really, really heavy rain, but it's a little bit more scattered over one area. So we're talking Matthews could see heavy rain, Mint Hill maybe not, even though they're very, very close together. So far, some of the highest totals have been especially up and again in those mountain areas, as Brad mentioned. Also a few spots in Lancaster and Chester County. Less of a concern because the mountains and foothills especially saw a lot of rain with this past event that we had on Thursday and then again last Saturday. So not 2 days ago, but 9 days ago. But see even portions of the mountains coming up with about 2.5, 2.6. You can see over toward Shelby there in Cleveland County. We have some 2.1s mixing in, 1.7. And sometimes these reports are delayed, so we could have even more higher totals over the next 12 hours or so. So of course we'll continue to keep you updated. There's a pocket, especially over toward Pickens, South Carolina, really on the border there, just south of Hendersonville between South and North Carolina. Also picking up on a few isolated spots close to 3.5 to 4.5. So really, really heavy rain there. That's north of Highland. So about an hour or so north of Greenville, Spartanburg area, if you're talking about that border there between South and North Carolina. Further south, again, Chester County, you have a lot of 2.5, 2.7s being picked up. The same for Southern Union. Parts of Anson County, you can see down toward Lancaster and Chesterfield County as well. But really, the lack of bullseye has been a lot of that 485 loop. Still seeing rain and rainfall recorded, but about 1 inch or so for most of those spots there. Again, you can see the 485 loop looking a little bit on the drier side for now. But as Brad mentioned, we'll still be tracking more rain on the way. I did want to show you further south, because this area, if you have friends or family in this region, hopefully they already are weather aware of what's happening, but make sure that they are. Between Columbia in Savannah, Georgia. So you can kind of see those areas south of the upstate, southwest or southeast there of Augusta, and kind of hugging the border there. We've seen a lot of spots, 6 inches, 7, even more than 8 inches of rain. That, of course, also continuing south there of Statesboro down toward Jessup, Georgia. So that's just west of Savannah. I mean, a lot of significant heavy rain for areas that, just like us, have seen a decent amount of stronger storms over the past few weeks. Now, we've talked a ton about the drought. How much do we need? How much rain do we need that we could get rid of the drought completely? Well, good news is that within a month, those totals have gone down a bit. We're looking at about 4.5 to, I'd say, 6 or so inches. But in the long range, so the 3-month data, we're still looking at about 13 to 15. What that tells us is that in the near term, the rain is really, really helping. But in the long range, we would still need at least a day, maybe 2 or 3 more days similar to this in order to get back up to speed. And again, that's based on days getting about 2 to 3 inches. inches. Here's the drought monitor. It started 60 days ago. That's where we saw the map. Things have improved since mid-March. You can see those pockets there over toward Raleigh. We have a few near Columbia and then western North Carolina starting to see some improvement from the drought. But we still need a lot of help here across the Piedmont. Most of our 22 local counties are still under those moderate drought conditions, so that level 2. We will also say that any rain that falls today will be counted in the drought monitor that comes out on Thursday. I know sometimes when we show those, it can be a little bit confusing as to where the data comes from if we see rain, for example, on Wednesday. But the data is collected, Brad, on Tuesdays and kind of compiled all together. And then the official numbers that we get come out on Thursday. So Thursday's update will include any rain we had today.
Yeah, it'll be nice to see how that kind of gets affected, because it is weird that the outlook comes out on Thursday, but the data is Tuesday to Tuesday. So sometimes we'll get rain late Tuesday and Wednesday, and even on Thursday, people go, wow, this is included. It's like, nope, got to wait till next week to count that. So there's definitely going to be improvement. Will the drought be gone completely? Probably not, but I think that moderate drought might be back down to abnormally dry, and some of the abnormally dry might get back to normal. So we have a saying all the time that droughts don't start overnight or form overnight. They don't go away overnight, and you need steady rain over weeks and even sometimes months to really get back to normal. And the other thing about this time of year is we're in the heart of the growing season. If you grow anything or you mow lawns, you know everything's growing. So we're using moisture really more than we do any other time of the year. That's why droughts this time of year can be really problematic. You need just 1 inch of rain per week just to maintain growth. That doesn't even add to a surplus or anything. So if you're not getting that, that's how much your plants are using almost every week out of the soil, 1 inch of rainfall. So we'd like to see more than that to catch up. Now, the area where we're getting way too much, and this could be a growing problem, and I wouldn't be surprised if at some point we do see a flood warning for parts of, I would say, Burke County, upper Burke County, because you're looking at some real heavy rain. And what's interesting about the eastern facing slopes, we call it the escarpment. It's basically where you go from elevations that are, maybe around 1,000 feet, and it ramps up to 4,000 or 5,000 feet, those eastern facing slope. It's basically a ridge line that runs right through here and goes all the way up towards Fancy Gap as you're going up 77. That little area is like the pinnacle of where this ramping effect or upslope occurs, and that's where we're seeing the highest totals. I was just looking at some of our cooperative gauges and COCORAs, which are community of people that spot and do rain measurements for us. There's definitely a very narrow line of over 4 inches of rain in the past 48 hours along that area. So that's an area we'll watch for flooding, because that water then runs downstream, and so all these creeks and streams that feed into like Lake James and eventually the Catawba River, that's where that water goes. So like the Linville River in particular, in the Linville Gorge, this is an area, the upper part of the gorge, which is near Jonas Ridge, is absolutely getting clobbered with heavy rain right now. But zoom in on it. Jonas Ridge is right there on your map. So this is an area in particular. And I put the actual creeks and streams on here. So you see the creeks running out of this area. So these are all flowing this direction. Some of these do flow up towards Tennessee, but a lot of these run down to the southeast and feed into the Lake James area. So the Linville River in particular, there's probably flowing pretty good right now. I'm going to have to check as I'm talking. I'm going to look real quickly at some of the gauges up there just to see where we are as far as flooding is concerned, because there is a flood advisory in this area right now that I'm pointing at on the map. So I'm going to take a look at some of the observations up in this area. And I see one, Wilson Creek, which is where I expect. That's not too far away from Collettsville area. They're actually in moderate stage of flooding, basically what we call action stage. So right there, this is Wilson Creek at Attico Road, about 3 miles southwest of Collettsville. The river there, in this case the creek, Wilson Creek, is up to 5.74 feet. So it's come up quite a bit, and that's in that vicinity as well. If we go up into areas around the Watauga River near Fosco, that river's actually come up quite a bit, 9.22 feet. So we have seen a pretty big rise in the Watauga River, and that's just a little bit further north. Let's go up to there because I want to pinpoint where that area is as well. So those are the areas that I'm watching carefully. So there's Banner Elk right there. That's the middle of Avery County. We go into area around Boone. So this is the area right in here where we're starting to see the Watauga River like surge up to about 9 feet. So we're getting pretty high on these waterways up here. We'd like to see the rain kind of subside. If we let the rain subside, these water levels would come down pretty quickly. The thing to remember is if we were not in a drought, we would definitely have flooding going on because these creeks and streams are really low stream flow to begin with because of the lack of rain this spring. So there's some room for these creeks and streams to absorb some of this rainfall. But now that we're getting, now in day 2 of this, we're starting to see the levels come up quite a bit. So the Watauga River definitely coming up quite a bit. Certainly looks like it's starting to, get pretty high up there. So we're starting to see some flooding coming out of the foothills, especially upper Burke County in particular. As I mentioned, that was an area of greatest concern. I'm going to zoom in on that area again. So there's Linville right there. There's Morganton. So this is what I'm pointing at right here. This is the Linville Gorge right in here. There's the Linville River goes right through the middle of the gorge. That's where you're seeing some of the heaviest amounts. So let's kind of focus in on that. And that area around Jonas Ridge in the Pinola area. So I'm going to query, I believe this is going to be 48-hour rainfall. We'll see. I'm going to double check my rainfall, make sure we're doing this correctly. So yeah, 48-hour rainfall. So this is a radar estimate. Kind of shows you the radar not doing a good job at estimating this, which is pretty common in these upslope events because the radar beam is probably overshooting a lot of the rain, which is happening closer to the ground. So this is saying 2.70, but I can tell you actual gauge there. I'm going to actually pull it up on my laptop here. Let me look at the actual gauge right there. I'm going to zoom in on it. So I'm looking at Jonas Ridge. I've got our cooperative observer right there, 4.47 inches, so almost 4.5 inches of rain. So roughly double of what we're seeing on the radar estimates. So that's something to keep in mind. The radar, as I often say, there's limitations to radar. It's not a forecasting tool, first of all. Secondly, it's not always live. It's close to real time, but the radar has limitations. The radar beam only sees certain parts of the sky, and the farther you are away from the radar, the less of these storms you're seeing. So the radars that are scanning here are really far away, so we're not seeing a lot of what's happening up in that area. So I would not be surprised, and I know Brittany was just sending me a message up in that area, that we start to see some flooding concerns in upper Burke County. We might see a flood warning issued here pretty quickly.
Yeah, right now, the update that I sent you, Brad, it's Burke County. This comes from Burke County 911. Yeah. North Carolina's 183 is shut down at 181, so that intersection, due to clogged ditches. It looks like both lanes have water covering them, and NCDOT is on the way to try to help clear that up. You mentioned, though, before about how ditches and things can get really, really clogged.
That I saw was primarily due to clogged storm drains, and that water can get through it. That's another problem with the drought. Sometimes when it doesn't rain for a while, usually every rain washes some of the debris out of there. Well, the debris has time to pile up because there hasn't been a good downpour or gully washer. And so then when we do get a big downpour like this, all that debris gets put into basically what amounts to a bottleneck in that pipe or that creek, or in this case, a storm drain clogs it up, and then that causes all kinds of issues.
Yeah, it's like those little helicopter, we've had all of those as pollen.
Those things were clogging my gutters really bad. And actually caused one of my drains to clog up near my house. So yeah, those little helicopters definitely do a number on things.
I do know the answer to this, but I just wanted you to be able to give an official answer if you would like to. We did have someone who actually sent me a message on Facebook and was wondering about whether or not, because we were talking about flooding in the mountains and foothills, and we know this will be nothing like Helene, but because of the fact that the Catawba River Basin kind of starts the chain there, like we talked a lot about with flooding from Helene, is this enough rain to cause any significant issues there that could bring all the way down to Mecklenburg County, like Mountain Island? Yeah, that's certainly the part we're focused on, upper Burke County. All of this drains into the Catawba Basin, but because it's such a small area, and remember, in the springtime, usually they try to bring the lake levels down to allow for spring rains. You tend to have some room available in these lakes. I'd have to check the lake levels. I look real quickly. I'll look at Lake James real quickly. Lake James is well below. Actually, it was lowered, it looks like, before this event. So it's about 3 feet below full pond. So we've got some room in Lake James. If we look at areas like Lake Hickory, it's at right now 96. So there's about 3.5 and 96.9, I should say. So about 3.5
feet of room in there. We'll look further down. Lookout Shoals is one that tends to flood pretty quickly. They lowered it below where it was earlier. It's at 95, so there's some room. So I'm not too worried about that. And then Lake Norman, which can hold a lot of water, is at 97. So I would not anticipate major issues on the Catawba chain right now because the water levels have been lowered ahead of time and there's room for this water. And we're just talking about a very finite area. So you see the area shaded in green? This actually includes parts of Avery County, parts of Caldwell County, and a big chunk of Upper Burke County, and even a little sliver as you go over into McDowell County. So this is an area that we're seeing the heaviest rain, and actually we're going to have problems I think pretty soon, Brittany, because look at the convective elements, basically thunderstorm type event on the radar here. This is elevated convection, it looks like, heading in here. So you're going to see the rainfall rates jump as this moves up here. So we're likely, wouldn't be shocked to see a flood warning issued for this area pretty quickly.
Yeah, and we were looking at that last night, that it looked like the mountains and foothills and areas west of 77 were going to be the bullseye for that potential of getting anything more than 4 inches of rain. So it looks like that has held strong, although a big hole that we've seen is Asheville. I mean, not that they necessarily need a ton of rain, but they were kind of on the bullseye too, just like the mountains and foothills, to see a lot. And there's a big old dry slot that's been hanging out there for quite some time.
Yeah, the dry slot has been trying to move in pretty quickly. And let me show you what we're talking about. I'm going to bring up the water vapor loop because it's a great way to show you where this is in the atmosphere. So what the dry slot is, low pressure systems have an area of dry air that wraps around the low. I'm going to widen this out, and you can see obviously we've got a low pressure system. So this is the fire hose of moisture out here, but there's also a dry slot that gets wrapped in there. See these areas of orange and yellow? This is dry air getting pushed up, and the dry air is mainly in the mid and upper level. It's still humid at the surface, but you go up in the mid and upper levels, it's much drier air. So what that does is that provides less moisture for heavy rainfall, but it does create instability. And what does instability create? Thunderstorms. It creates clearing. So when you look in that area, you'll see within the dry slot, you see these blue, these are thunderstorms exploding right along the Savannah River here, going between Georgia and South Carolina. So these can travel north, and if they're thunderstorms, they will likely weaken as we get close to sunset, which is around 8:18 tonight, but they could still keep the moisture with them and eventually produce rain as they move to the north. So we can look at this with the radar and satellite combined together. I'll show you what this same area looks like when we look at the radar and satellite. Taking a second to load here, but you'll see that there was some clearing taking place down in this area. Let's zoom in, and so you can see right there, these are thunderstorms that have developed, and look at all the clearing that's taking place. In fact, things have brightened up just a little bit. I'm looking out our window over here. Things are brightening up a little bit out here on southwest side of town. So there's definitely been a clearing, or at least thinning of the clouds in spots, which is going to allow these storms to move up. And if we turn on our warnings, we can actually show you that there are several severe thunderstorm warnings. That one's got a warning, that one's got a warning, and that one's got a warning, and a couple flood warnings in here as well. So probably just a matter of time before we see some flood warnings, especially in the mountains and foothills. And that's really where I think the focus is going to be for the remainder of the evening if we do see some issues moving into that area. Let me loop this a couple times, and you'll kind of see right there, this is definitely a cluster we're going to have to watch. Let me look at the futurecast real quickly. I'm going to bring up our short range rapid refresh model, we call it. This is something we look at quite a bit to see where the short range guidance is going to go. So I'm going to bring this up, and this only goes out about 18 hours. It reruns every hour, so it gives us kind of a good idea on where the future radar is going to look like. And you can see that those cells kind of continue to move north between 2 and 3 in the morning, and as we get to tomorrow morning, things will thin out a little bit, and we'll actually see some sunshine. So you can see tomorrow there's likely going to be a lot more breaks developing in the cloud cover, and we'll see more sunshine, but that means still scattered storms, just not the giant shield of rain like we woke up to this morning that pretty much covered the entire area. Now we're looking at just more scattered stuff that's going to be moving through today and into tomorrow. And so if you're heading out to Quail Hollow this week, this is going to be more of the pattern where it's sunny, hot, and humid for most of the day, and then in the evenings we see these scattered pop-up storms. So just to give you an update on the rain chances tomorrow, because today was kind of a washout. Tomorrow a lot of folks will be taking their tickets for the practice round today, which they kept kept all the spectators away. You can use them tomorrow, your Championship Plus tickets tomorrow and again on Wednesday for the practice rounds. You get the idea, scattered stuff around through the middle of the day. As we get closer to sunset, those rain chances go down. So if you're going out there tomorrow, bring the poncho and the golf umbrella. You're definitely going to want to have those, because we're definitely going to see some scattered storms around, but also just be prepared for it to be kind of sticky out there tomorrow with the heat and humidity. So yeah, Brittany, that area in Upper Burke County in particular, some of the first signs I've seen, not only gauge-wise, but also starting to see some of the stream gauges where we do have some pretty high water in those areas, especially Wilson Creek area. I keep refreshing the gauge to see, you know, where we are, but Wilson Creek there, which is just north of Morganton, right on the, you know, Caldwell Burke County line, that is actually showing a pretty big rise in water right now. I mean, it's not huge, but it's in action stage. It came up from about 3 feet this morning, and now it's at about 5.7 feet. So it's coming up pretty quickly. And then the other areas, the Watauga River, just west of Boone, near Fosco, it's up to 9.5 feet, and that puts it in minor flood stage right now. So definitely got to keep an eye on those two areas. All the other gauges are in green, meaning they're below any kind of flood level. So those are the two gauges we're watching. The one, Wilson Creek, is definitely one I'm very familiar with up there in Burke County and Caldwell County. That feeds right into Lake James eventually, and good trout fishing stream up there as well, the headwaters of Wilson Creek. But that's where we're seeing some of the heaviest rainfall, Jonas Ridge area, and that's all flowing downhill into that area.
I remember Fosco too, that gauge. We looked at a lot during last September, of course,
Yep.
in October during Helene. It also looks like areas south of us and east of us toward Myrtle Beach, Columbia, kind of where we saw that bullseye, are still seeing some of the heavier rain, and kind of those gauges move up quickly. Any concern about the fact that, obviously we know it's a little bit more scattered, but if some of that heavy rain could, you know, resurge, I guess, moving over those same areas, if they've seen heavy rain, that could continue for us?
Yeah, I think the area in the mountains and foothills would be the biggest concern. Here locally, we've had several hours to dry down, but the area you're zoomed in right there, that in particular, because those storms that are forming down in Georgia, they will likely weaken, but they're still going to have rain with them when they get up here. So that could add, and then you ramp up that moisture into the mountains, you're likely going to see an additional rainfall. So yeah, those areas in particular, I mean, this is definitely becoming like the spot we're watching. It does look like down in York and Chester County, it looks like a little cell trying to develop. There was some sunshine out briefly here. Yeah, it looks like north of Chester had a little downpour that has formed south of Lowry, so there's 321. This is traveling north, so these, trust me, because of the amount of precipitable water in the atmosphere, which is a term we use for all the moisture from the ground to the top of the troposphere, and when that gets up around 2 inches, that's pretty saturated. I've seen 3-inch amounts in some of our extreme flood events, but 2 inches is pretty tropical. I mean, Brittany made a good point. This isn't a tropical system, but it's got some of the similarities with the low pressure system sitting off to our west. If you loop this a couple of times, that could be a remnant low from a tropical system just based on that appearance. And we're on the east side where we get this, you know, it's almost like an atmospheric river of moisture coming in. But it looks like the axis, thankfully for us, is here. If this was sitting right over the western part of the state, we would definitely have some big time problems going on.
Yeah, and with that same, you know, I guess tropical-esque, you know, setup, you've been tracking some of those quick spin-up tornado warnings that have been east of us, way over toward the Raleigh area, but that's very common too with those remnant tropical systems as well, that the drag over land in combination with the wind shear can oftentimes cause those quick spin-ups. We have, of course, we were looking at this earlier, but Aiken, South Carolina, they had a confirmed EF1 that occurred very, very early this morning, and then there's that tornado warning near Raleigh just a little bit ago.
Yeah, that Aiken tornado, that was at like 3:50 in the morning, and that was an EF1, high-end EF1, 105 mile-per-hour winds. That was a pretty powerful tornado for this kind of setup. Brittany alluded to the tropical tornado type risk. They're very low top storms, so they're not very tall, and all the shear is happening close to the surface. So it's usually the rotation of the low itself that's causing the issues. And if we're going to see that, there is for us, there's not much of a tornado risk, especially as you get further north and west. But in this area, and then moving into South Carolina, this definitely is an area I would watch. In fact, if I were to highlight an area for the rest of the evening for maybe I call it a 2%, what we call marginal tornado risk, this area right in here is definitely an area I would watch. And then the other area which we alluded to is here in eastern North Carolina. Let me turn on the radars over here real quickly, just so you can see those. That would be another area that I think we should watch carefully, because that's getting warm, humid air advected in from the coast. So you kind of see there's a lot going on. I mean, this is the rain I'm talking about. If this was over us, we would have all kinds of problems. We're actually seeing problems with just the scattered stuff, but this is really the fire hose of moisture back to the west. I actually was going to look at the moisture levels with the precipitable water. I'm going to look at that real quickly, bring it up in our system here, because some of these moisture levels are super high.
Yeah. To give perspective, like during the summer where we see those heavy pockets of rain, we get a tropical system. PWATs are normally precipitable water values like 2.5 to 3, if not higher. So 2 is really close to that, especially for this time of year.
So here's the map. So this is it says atmospheric moisture, but this is essentially precipitable water. It's showing that moisture plume. Look where it's aimed at in eastern North Carolina. So this is why we've kind of lucked out a little bit. This is shifted over here instead of being right here. But when you see that tropical, that is an atmospheric river in the eastern part of the state. So we really did kind of get lucky, and you can see a lot of this moves out tomorrow, and then we see better weather as we go into the middle of the week. And I say better, just lower chances of rain. You're not looking at widespread issues. So quickly, I want to recap the flood watch, because the areas of concern are actually working out exactly where the watch is. This is why these are so effective. Flood watch in effect for the areas with the heaviest rain now. Notice I'll get out of the way. These go all the way back here into the upstate, because this is where that escarpment is, basically where the mountains come right there. And then this area, as Brittany alluded to, they saw so much rain this past weekend, early on and on Sunday into Monday, and then we saw the second wave of rain happening today in the afternoon on Monday. So that area has already been saturated pretty well. So Brittany, we're going to continue to watch this, but I would say heads up for folks in Upper Burke, Caldwell County, as well as eastern Avery, Watauga, and parts of Ashe County.
Yeah, and for those areas south of us, down toward Columbia, South Carolina, if you're watching this, you have friends or family in that area, for that low-end chance of a brief spin-up tornado, or even just some really strong gusty winds too.
Yeah, and for sure, we'll keep an eye on it. We will be cutting back into our WCNC Plus stream throughout the evening, every 30 minutes or so. So at 15 after the hour and 15 before the hour. But we're going to go back to the Impact Studio because, hey, it's also draft lottery night for the NBA. And the Hornets have a pretty good chance. One of the 3 teams have a chance to get that #1 pick. And so we're hoping those ping pong balls in the machines will work in our favor. But we're going to have a draft show coming up here in an hour. Brittany and I will hop back in at 7:15 and 7:45 to give you an update on the weather. But let's toss it back over to the Impact Studio.